This handsome terrace, with St. Stephen's Church in the distance, is Fettes Row in the new town of Edinburgh. In 1975, it achieved royal recognition as the first completed restoration project by the Edinburgh New Town Conservation Committee, and was visited by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. This massive restoration project involved number 23, the home of the Edinburgh Cine Society, and number 24, the 3 private houses above, and is yet another stage in the renovation and revitalization of the new town, now over 200 years old. Other parts of the new town have already been improved, and Charlotte Square, at the western end of the original plan, has been almost completely restored. It now houses the National Trust for Scotland and the Secretary of State's residence in Edinburgh. At the other end of George Street lies St. Andrew's Square, with the head offices of many insurance companies and banks round the gardens. When built over 2 centuries ago, the spaciousness of the new town contrasted with the overcrowded houses of the old town, standing on the ridge of rock beside the castle. To the north of St. Andrew's Square is Abercrombie Place, another of the imposing crescents of the new town, with buildings on one side of the street only and more gardens opposite. In recent years, the property has been much renovated and cleaned up, removing the accumulated dirt and grime. Murray Place, at the opposite end of Heriot Row from Abercrombie Place, was part of the original New Town plan and was built in the traditional Grecian style as homes for the wealthier Edinburgh citizens. It too has undergone cleaning and restoration in recent years, and now much more resembles its original appearance. Near Murray Place lies Ainsley Place, again a wide street with gardens in the centre of the circle of buildings. But here, restoration work has been slower, and many of the buildings still have the darkened stonework as a memorial to the smoky days of Old Reekie. Much of the outside metalwork, however, has been renewed, and the balconies, railings, and newly replaced lamps have restored it to its former glory. In Fettes Row itself, the ravages of time have proceeded unchecked for 150 years, and the stonework itself was fast decaying and crumbling away. In 1968, numbers 23 and 24 Fettes Row were made a listed building, and in September 1969, a Dean of Guild order was made for the cutting away of the defective stonework. This was actually commenced in 1970, but subsequent changes in the regulations meant that the only satisfactory solution was a complete replacement of the stonework. It was not until the winter of 1973 that the scaffolding was erected prior to the actual reconstruction taking place. In the interval, the Fettes Row Association was formed and contact made with the Edinburgh New Town Conservation Committee, under whose auspices the project was carried through. The estimated cost in 1972 was £35,000, but this eventually rose to over £50,000. Fortunately for the proprietors, including the Edinburgh Cine Society, various grants were obtained through the Conservation Committee, so that the actual cost to the Society, who owned the ground floor and the basement, was around £3,000, and for the owners of the flats above, about £1,000 each. For the Cine Society, with under 100 members, the prospect of finding the necessary £3,000 was quite daunting. The Society, however, received an interest-free loan of £1,350 from the Pilgrim Trust, and this enabled the society to allow the work to begin. It also spurred on many members to give interest-free loans. During all the time the work was in progress, life carried on in the various properties as far as possible, and in the Cine Society itself, various gala shows and special functions were held to try to accumulate the £3,000 needed, as well as continuing with the normal meetings. The Housing Association also held regular meetings in the Society's premises, and this proved very useful, being right on the spot, and the progress of the work could easily be followed. The first stage in the reconstruction was the removal of some of the facing stones, and this revealed that much of the stonework behind the facade was of a very inferior material, some of it little more than rubble. This entailed a lot of extra work by the replacement of the worst of the stone by brickwork to give a solid foundation for the new stone facing. Some of the window frames had to be renewed, and in addition, the wooden lintels were replaced by metal beams above the windows. The summer of 1974 was warm, and on the roof of the building the slaters were able to take full advantage of the sunshine. Many of the slates had to be replaced, and with the new stonework at roof level, the opportunity was taken to put in new roans and gutters. With all the work to be undertaken, the workmen had little time to appreciate the view over Fettes Row and the northern part of the city. Here is the Slater's angle of St. Stephen's Church at the foot of Frederick Street, and his clear view of the distant Firth of Forth. Fettes College, a famous boarding school for boys, stands out prominently. It was endowed by Sir William Fettes, an Edinburgh merchant, who was twice Lord Provost of Edinburgh, and who also gave his name to Fettes Row. The quarry of Hopeman on the Marishire coast was chosen as an alternative to Craigleith Quarry, originally specified by the architects. The local stone was too expensive, and too little of it remained to justify its use in Fettes Row. The Hopeman Quarry lies near Burgh Head and Gordonston School, now well known because of its royal pupils. Once the large pieces of stone are removed from the quarry, they are cut roughly into blocks of a more manageable size, so that they can be taken away and cut more accurately into slabs for the specific jobs. The initial work is done by drilling the stones and splitting them, after which they are carried to the mason's yard for final cutting and machining. The power-operated circular saw has diamond-tipped teeth, and in order to keep the teeth cool, a jet of water is used all the time during the cutting operation. The sizes of the individual pieces of stone have all been specified by the architect, and after each piece has been cut, it is marked with a reference number corresponding to the architect's plan. Many of the stones forming cornices and edges have shaped or beveled sides, and in the mason's yard the shaping is carried out with a pneumatic chisel to a pre-cut template, so that all the stones will accurately match the ones which are being replaced. To allow perfect fitting of the stone into the building itself, the individual pieces are cut by the machines fractionally longer than needed, and the final trimming is done by the mason on the job by the traditional method of hammer and chisel. The process is repeated stone by stone, and it is this hand finishing and careful fitting which takes so much time, but which undoubtedly gives the perfect appearance to the completed job. The mason on the Fettes Row contract was Mr. Tom Hislop, and with his assistant, Mr. Ian Walker, he was responsible for the entire refacing of the building. Once each piece has been accurately cut and fitted, it is cemented into place according to the plan, and gradually the whole building is refaced. The last stage is to rub the stone down with sandpaper to give a final polish and bring up its true color and texture. By now it is approaching the spring of 1975, and the upper 3 stories have been completed. The top part of the scaffolding has been removed, and for the first time we get a glimpse of the building in its new state. As with the windows in the main part of the building, the fan light above the door has to be replaced. The old glass is knocked out, the woodwork is renewed, and finally new glass is inserted, individually cut to the shape of each frame. Here, Mr. Michael Allen, of the firm of Allen Brothers, who are carrying out the work, is discussing with Mr. Hislop the fitting of the new steps. The stone blocks for the steps, both up to the entrance of the building and at the end of the pavement outside, are much too heavy to be manhandled into position, so a mobile crane is brought into operation. The last part of the contract was the renewal of the outside railings and gates, the repainting of the doors and windows in approved colors, and some interior renovation and repairs. By now the work is virtually complete, and Mr. John Knight, Secretary of the Edinburgh First Conservation Society, showed the building to Lord Muirshiel, Mr. Maurice Lindsay and Sir Ralph Anstruther, equerry to Her Majesty the Queen Mother, and discussed the final plans for her visit to Fettes Row later in the month. After presentations in Fettes Row of the proprietors of numbers 23 and 24, and of representatives from the various associations and firms connected with the work, Her Majesty was invited by Mr. Andrew Kerr, the Vice Chairman of the Edinburgh Newtown Conservation Committee, to unveil a plaque commemorating her visit. Her Majesty was presented with a bouquet by Lorraine Gowans, daughter of the first chairman of the Fettes Row Association, and she then entered the Cine Society premises to be welcomed by Mr. Frank Walker, the president for 1975, and other members of the club. In the lounge of the Society, the Queen Mother graciously signed the visitor's book, not forgetting to add the date of this memorable occasion. After being shown round the club rooms, Her Majesty said goodbye to the many people she had met, and had a special word with some of the teachers from Donaldson's School for the Deaf, who had brought their pupils to see her. As the royal cavalcade departed, the spectators all began discussing the charm and friendliness of this truly gracious lady, and of the honor she had paid that day to Fettes Row on the completion of this imposing restoration project.